Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody. This is Monday, the 25th of January 2021. This is the Norfolk Strategic Member Forum. So my name is John Fuller and I'm your chairman, and we are joined on this call by the planning leads, members and officers for each of the local planning authorities in Norfolk, including the Broads Authority. In the agenda today, we're going to talk about older people's accommodation, green infrastructure, climate change, and an update from Keith Moore, our friend from the Environment Agency, and then a bit of an update on the strategic planning framework and neighbouring counties. And there's a late paper, really just for noting, that establishes where we are on the housing delivery test figures having been published last week. So without further ado, we're supported by Neenan, give us a wave, and Trevor from Norwich City Council. So the minutes and matters arising looked good to me, and many of the things on this agenda was a result of our minutes last time. So is everyone happy with those? Good, let's move on in that case. We've got Kathleen Dunmore, who I think is joining us from the County Council. Kathleen, can you unhide yourself wherever you are? There you are. I've got you on verbals, but not on video yet. So perhaps you can turn your video on.
It says my video is on.
There you are. Got you now. You've just come in.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
one of the things we have to do as a local authorities is a housing needs assessment. It's not just the aggregate number of houses, although we do that. It's subdividing them. And one of the issues we've got is older persons accommodation and support needs. One of the things I'm very focused on is making sure this isn't just about the very elderly and infirm. I think one of the consequences of COVID will be that people possibly in their 50s will sadly fall out of the job market in the short term and might find it very difficult to get back in. And so I think we're going to have people with very extended pre-retirement retirements, and the needs for those people needs to be taken into account as well. So that's by way of introduction. I'm sure you're going to cover that, but it's important we just don't talk about people who are in very advanced years and infirm. There's going to be a whole continuum of need to support older people as they transition, possibly with blended careers, into full retirement. And hopefully your report is going to do that. So with that in mind, I'm going to take myself off mute. And Kathleen, you're going to take us through the list, introducing yourself first.
Okay, can everybody see me? I'm a bit... Yep. Okay, I'm Kathleen Dunmore. I'm from a company called Three Dragons, and with Opinion Research Services, we did this study for the county and the 7 districts, focusing on older persons' housing requirements. I realised to my horror when I was putting this presentation together that I've been working on older persons' housing issues since the 1980s, and I'm rapidly approaching the age where I could potentially be a consumer as well as a provider. I have qualifications in economics and in health and social care, and I provided evidence for the London Plan and for Northamptonshire councils for their older persons planning, as well as being an advisor to the APPG on older persons housing and care. I've been working extensively with Jessamy Hayes from the County Council and with Trevor from the county and with all the local authority planning and housing officers who've been absolutely brilliant at asking difficult questions that needed resolution and providing data about how the local housing market operates. Can anybody actually see the presentation? Neenan, are you able to put it up, or do you want me to show it?
Whilst we wait for that, Kathleen, how long, time-wise, it's 2:05 now, how long had you anticipated speaking, so we can just sort of chunk the time budget and keep everyone to time?
I was planning to speak for 15 minutes.
Perfect, that'd be ideal, yeah, good.
Yeah, okay.
So Nina, how's this working, Nina, and who's going to share?
Kathleen, can you have a look? It might take a bit longer, I'm just trying. Can you do it?
How do I share on my screen?
Let me. some reason I'm having trouble, Kathleen. Can you share me?
I can if you talk me through sharing on Microsoft Teams, because I normally work on Zoom.
Right. Okay.
Right,
So
top right hand corner, next to the red leave button, immediately to the left, there's a screen with an upward arrow into it. Have you got it, Kathleen? Otherwise, I'd say what we're going to do, Kathleen, while you work this one out, I'm going to move straight on. If you can come back at 20 past,
Of course.
while we work out the technicals, and if necessary, work offline with Neenan. Let's Sue Hooton. So, oh, wait a minute, you got there.
Brilliant. I think Nina's got there.
Jessamy, you've gotten there. Well done. So you've saved the day.
Thanks, Jessamy. Okay, do you then want to move us on to the next slide? Could somebody move us? Brilliant. Okay. What you see here is an indication in the green and blue bars on the right of how the number of households aged 65 and over is going to change between 2020 and 2041. And very broadly, the total number of older person households, taking older person at a very generous 65 plus, and here in the chairman's comments, we might have to go down to 55 plus, is going to increase by about a third over the next 20 years. And that increase is going to be more marked in the rural districts, particularly in Bretland and South Norfolk, and less marked in urban Norwich and Great Yarmouth. But it is an issue for all districts in that we're all living longer, consequently there are more older persons. If you look at the blue and yellow circles, you'll see that the number of over 85s is actually set to more than double. And that's because there weren't very many very elderly people to start with, but as we live longer, that proportion increased faster than the people aged between 65 and 85. Next slide, please. As the chairman said, we need to have a range of different housing options for older people, accepting that we all age at different rates and that we have different attitudes to how we want to get our needs met. And that particularly varies depending on what, if any, type of frailty we have, whether we're living with long-term frailty or we're basically okay till the end of life, but then have 6 months or a year in which we are very frail, and also on access to support, which can be from partners, family or friends. So there are 4 different types of housing options that we were asked to consider, one of which is making sure that mainstream general needs housing that is built is suitable for older people, which generally means that it has level access, that rooms are big enough to be able to move around easily, that your bathroom or a toilet are on the ground floor, and that you can basically live in it for a short period of time if you're, say, recovering from a hip replacement. And of course, you can have domiciliary care coming into your home. So that's general needs housing, of which more is needed. Then there is specialised retirement housing with access to care and support. And you'll all be familiar with the type of retirement housing schemes where a number of people live in a flatted or bungalow. Developed number would fall considerably if we actually increase the supply of extra care housing. So there is a trade-off there. By 2041, there will be an additional 10,000 people living with dementia, most of them living in their family home because they're in the early to mid stages of dementia. But around about a third of them are going to need more support than can be given in the community. And a very sobering statistic, around 70% of current residents in care homes have got dementia. And that proportion is increasing as people who are mentally fully engaged are more capable of making their own arrangements. So we need to think really hard about what more can we do to give a greater variety of dementia provision. If we look at degrees of frailty, that group of very frail older people whom the chairman said we should not be concentrating on, around about a third of all retirement housing provision should be for extra care for the very frail. But if you've ever been in an extra care scheme that is just occupied by people who are very frail, you'll know that it is much more fun to live in if actually there's a mix of residents between those who are very frail and those who are a bit elderly and want to make provision for older age and get away from the responsibilities of looking after a house. So my personal suggestion would be that you should aim for more than a third of all retirement housing provision to be extra care, and that you should aim for more balanced communities. And as you'll see from the next slide, what I'm hoping that people can see.
Yes.
Okay, that asks what is already happening, and you can see that the County Council has taken a lead on this and has made a capital grant fund of £30 million available to provide 1,000 extra care units over the next 5 to 10 years. And you can see that there are 2 schemes in the pipeline, one at Fakenham, which I can pronounce, and one at Acle, which I know I'm going to get wrong. I apologise for that one in advance. And the County Council is actively working both with local planning authorities and looking at where new development could take place, and also trying to increase the range of retirement housing providers coming into Norfolk. We looked at how much retirement housing is being provided and by whom, and I thought you would be pleased to know that North Norfolk and Norwich are both in the top 10 authorities in the east of England for provision of specialist retirement housing. North Norfolk is providing approximately 100 units a year, and Norwich is providing approximately 35 units a year. What this says about the other authorities in the east of England, I will refrain from commenting on. But what it does demonstrate to me is that there is no reason in terms of viability why retirement housing providers should not be building in Norfolk. They just really need to have the flag from you which says, yes, please come here, you're very welcome. And that can be achieved. Next slide, please. I'm hoping you can see this because the screen I'm on is still stuck at increasing housing choice. But in terms of next steps, what needs to be done, and the districts are already well along the road to doing this, is to put in place encouraging and supportive town planning policies, which will require accessible homes within new build schemes to cater for those of us who just happen to be over 55 and would like to have slightly more generous living standards. And the government's proposals for future homes will in any case take us a long way towards that. In terms of retirement housing schemes, these generally come forward on windfall sites, and I'm starting to be asked about, is there a role for retirement housing in development on the growing number of vacant sites in town centres? And this is really about local authority planning officers being both clear and flexible when it comes to looking at proposals on windfall sites. Within urban extensions and major greenfield sites, you will know that anything you put in an urban extension in the plan is not going to come forward with any great urgency. But if you say in that plan that you do want to see extra care housing provision, then there's a good chance that you will attract major developers and that will be coming on stream probably within the next 5, 10, 15 years when there are actually some local facilities. And there are also, if we look across the country, examples in villages and market towns where the local community has carried out a neighbourhood plan and has identified that they recognise that they have an ageing population. They see a role for specialist older persons housing, which can be anything from a row of 8 bungalows or accessible housing units in a small village to a retirement housing scheme or a retirement village on the edge of a larger village. But a neighbourhood plan can send a very positive signal both to the council and to developers, which says, yes, we can see that this type of housing meets our need. There is demand across all tenures. At the moment, around 80% of all older people are homeowners, and even by 2041, that's still going to be pretty close to 70%. At the moment, most provision, because of the history of how it was provided, is social rented. There is a need to upgrade the social rented stock. It's also evident that some older people living in older terraced and flatted properties will not be able to afford new build outright purchase. And there are real examples of schemes which mix affordable stroke social rent, shared ownership and outright purchase and create very successful mixed communities. I'm hoping that the county is going to continue its capital grant funding beyond the 5 to 10 years. But again, let's concentrate on getting that money spent. And there are many examples from other parts of the country where putting public sector land into the pot is of great value, partly because it can be put in, we can have a debate about best value, but more importantly, because public sector land, old police stations, old community buildings, old surgeries, tend to be in locations that are absolutely ideal for retirement housing and that they're close to local facilities. And again, that comes down to having a dialogue between the owners of land, which is often the NHS, the districts and the county. And that dialogue is also very important for coordinating the various funding streams and tying up funding and planning, and also for sending that collective message to retirement housing providers in both the affordable and the market sector that Norfolk would be keen to see them there. And you also need, although I think government policy will make this mandatory across the country, you need to be making sure that your house builders, both the volume developers and the specialist developers, are including accessible homes within new build schemes. The jargon term is M42. The beyond refers to something called M43, which is about wheelchair accessible housing. And I can pick that up in questions if anybody wants me to. I've galloped through that presentation. I hope you've been able to see a bit more of it than I have. I will stop now and take any questions for as long as our chairman will permit me, recognising that you have a very full agenda. And as I said, you've got my email address. I think, Ninan, that the presentation will be sent round.
I can, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to contact me after this session, if you wake up in the middle of the night and think, gosh, I really wanted to talk to Kathleen about this, then please email me and I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I don't see any questions in the chat and there is no one put their hand up. Most of us know the rubric by now. If you want to talk, it's in the top bar, raise your hand. Kathleen, I mean, yes, I think there has been a resistance amongst local planning authorities. There's a monoculture approach, frankly, amongst some of our planners who said, you've got to be close to a surgery and everything else like that. And whilst I can see that can be important and it's not to be totally rejected, there has been, I think, a lack of choice because offered to the market for those people who are active retired. I mean, yes, we're all living longer, but sometimes we just take longer to get into the care bit. And so people can be in need of, if the last 5 years is pretty dicey, let's say, that goes from 85 to 90, whereas in the past it might have been 70 to 75. So I think we just have to recognise people live much longer, more healthily, but that doesn't mean they can't be there. And just to pigeonhole, old people just want flats until they sit in a soaked day centre somewhere is just not holding it back. Steve Faulkner, you've indicated with your hand. Let's go first.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, just a quick question. You referred to extra care homes and the demand increasing for that sector. Can you just clarify what the difference is of that compared with a traditional nursing home? Are we talking about McCarthy and Stone type residential unit? Thank you.
Yeah. If you think about a building that looks like a McCarthy and Stone type residential unit, but has got more communal areas, including very importantly a restaurant and possibly a facility that can be used for a visiting doctor, surgery, physiotherapist, chiropodist, and which also has access to care, so that residents will typically pay for a basic 2 to 3 hours of care stroke support a week, with the facility to draw on more care as they need it, if they get frailer or if they have to go into hospital and have an operation and come out and convalesce. And it will normally have more activities than the traditional McCarthy and Stone with a scheme manager. So we know, if we look at the recent COVID crisis, that extra care schemes have been very good at making sure that all residents, including those who don't have family support, are able to get meals delivered, that if they're too frail to pick it up, somebody will carry it to their front door, and in organising social activities, which can be anything from balcony bingo to quizzes to a range of activities, as well as providing the kind of deep cleansing that keeps places safe, so there haven't been outbreaks of COVID in the way that there have been in care homes. So extra care and sheltered housing look very similar, but the one has more support than the other. Does that help?
Yes, thanks, Kathleen. Thank you.
Good. Okay, no one else has come in. I might as well say abuse chairman's privilege. I find this sort of thing very depressing, because I think planners, and dare I say, Kathleen, some consultants like yourself have created a mental prison for yourself. We're healthy and then we are not. And I think there is insufficient attention being given to the opportunity for people who aren't ready to go into a home and frankly don't want to. And with the COVID epidemic, who would want to? And the concept of stepping down home. So a family that may have, granny who may have rattled around in a 5-bed house can step down to a nice modern bungalow. And I'm just astonishing that we haven't mentioned bungalows in this presentation as a need. I know they are more hungry for land, but if truly we've got this, then bungalows as part of a stepping down is a best way. And like I say, I just think it's all pretty depressing that the language around this is about frailty and vulnerability and wanting a chiropodist and all this sort of stuff. Important though I'm sure it is once you absolutely get to the extent of decrepitude. But we have to deal with the fact that people are going to be wanting to step down before then, and if necessary, sit around the golf course or do whatever they want to do. And the planning system is wholly against them. And I think your report would have had much greater impact and weight if we consider the fact that we're going to get blended and active retirements, than just assume that you just get old and frail. Right, Graham Plant, over to you. You can finish off.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, quite interesting report, and obviously I'm a county councillor, so I understand the need for care home and the reason we put the millions into trying to resolve an issue. But I did notice, I mean, I'm a Great Yarmouth councillor. I did notice in your report that you needed something like in the next, between now and 2050, 4,000 spaces in the Great Yarmouth area, which would take up the entire amount of extra housing that is needed for Great Yarmouth in that period. So basically, unless we built entirely for that sector in the next period, we wouldn't be covering off the numbers needed in your report. And I can't see any developer coming along and wanting to just build that kind of housing or to turn any kind of property into that kind of housing solely in the Great Yarmouth area. So I think there's a lot of discussion needed to be had around what is needed by new development, what is needed by a change of development in the towns and in the villages, because the numbers that you've put forward, I'm sure would take up a lot of the neighbourhood plan's full content without going into regular housing. And I think that needs a really careful look at from all the planners, because looking at the numbers that you've just put forward on your charts today, there is going to be a challenge, shall we say, to making sure that we don't double up on numbers. The numbers that we need for regular housing, the numbers that we need for the supported housing that you've articulated today, because that would double the housing need in most areas. Just highlighted, just came out at me from the screen when you showed that chart. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, did you want to come back, Kathleen?
If I may, Chairman. Yeah, first to say that as far as bungalows are concerned, yes, I recognise that these are very popular, that there is evidence from neighbourhood plans across the country that certainly many villages are saying, yes, what we actually want is bungalows. And I quite agree with you that we are certainly not saying all older people should go into small flats. There is a need for a variety of provision for older people. The two bars that I referred to in connection with Yarmouth, the 4,000 number actually refers to adaptable housing, as in the government's proposals for future homes, which will apply to all housing. So it isn't saying this is housing which can only be occupied by older people, and you've got to provide additional housing numbers for general needs housing. The government is saying general needs housing should be getting larger and more adaptable stroke flexible. Now that's a general question about land take and viability and affordability, but I think you're going to have to address that question anyway as part of your local plans adapting to the government's proposals for future homes. And within that, looking at how, as older people looking to downsize, we have a greater variety of choice than moving from a 5-bed to a 2-bed, and we might actually move to a 3-bed that doesn't have tiny rooms, would I think be quite an appealing option. But you're quite right, it isn't about saying, oh, look, you're 65 or 85, you've got to move into a retirement flat. And when we talk to 65-year-olds and 85-year-olds, we typically find that about 20–25% of them are interested in different housing options. But for some of them, that might be an enormous self-build next to a golf course. And for some of them, it might be a flat next to the shops and the library. I think what I'm saying is provide more housing choice across Norfolk and think about older people, but also about how bigger housing can help everybody live better quality lives.
Okay, I just come back a little bit on that, John. And one, I recognise what you just said, so thank you for that. But the county council is working on the premise at the moment of trying to keep people in their homes for as long as possible.
That's
and
right.
Supporting them in staying in their homes for as long as possible. Once they get to the point where they're unable to look after themselves in their own homes, then we start looking at alternative provision from that point of view, which may then free up the home that they were in for someone else. We don't know. But at the end of the day, it is a turning circle, and it's housing. As we build bigger houses and families move into them, it frees up a 2-bedroom or a 3-bedroom. So there is a churn in the market, but having the ability to convert them to the changes that are needed for people in greater need, I think that pot that the county council's put aside is to help that happen, is to change and alter some housing to try and make it available for people who may need alterations to the homes to make it comfortable for them. I'll leave it there.
Thank you for that. Right. Thank you. Well, Alan, you've got 60 seconds, then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Chairman. I understand Kathleen's point about being kind of up and open for people to come and flagging up that we're open. But the viability issues that we have in West Norfolk and many parts of our area kind of make it really difficult. We struggle to get houses at all. And I just wonder, with all the extra facilities, the extra cost, the viability will kind of tumble. So I'm just kind of asking, how can we do more?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? I mean, you've got a whole load of leisure businesses that are absolutely on their backsides, and we're just going to be more flexible to allow hotels and leisure businesses to try and leverage some of the grounds they've got to have, supported living, additional living over and above. We're just going to have to be significantly more flexible about how we assist some of our existing businesses to adapt a new environment where more old people want more active retirements, and and leverage the infrastructure you're there. It's not just a question of having new infrastructure; it's about using the infrastructure we've got more effectively, isn't it, Alan? And as planners, you're going to have to get on the bus.
I understand that, but if people don't want to build because of the viability issues, I'm not talking about infrastructure, I'm talking about the physical profit from building units of accommodation. And it's acknowledged that older person housing is slightly more expensive to provide. I just wonder how you try and square that circle, even if you are open to development taking place in all those different places you explain.
There we are. Good. Well, we're probably not going to bottom it out today, but we've had a good kick around this. At least we've got a sort of a sense of the quantum of the numbers, and I think that's certainly useful. So thank you very much indeed, Kathleen, for your attendance. You're welcome to stay if you wish. Otherwise, we're now going to move on to item number 4 on the agenda with Sue. Where's Sue? Are you going to? I can hear you've got.
Here, Chairman.
I can hear you've got your hair clippers in the background.
Thank you. I'm expecting Alan to introduce this item, please. Thank you.
And Sue, there's a huge amount of background noise, so you might like to attend to that first.
I can try without my headset.
I think that will be useful.
Is that better?
No. Oh, that's better.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll try without it, but I have a noisy laptop, hence the headphones. So apologies for the noise. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Sue. Members will be aware of this project, which has been going on for quite a little while now, but it's very, very complicated. That's what I would say. This is a true example of duty to cooperate across the whole of the local planning authorities in Norfolk, because all of these issues, habitat regulations, assessment, affect us all. But people don't go where you would neatly contain them within a West Norfolk boundary or a Norwich boundary or wherever else. They're going all over the place, and it causes issues of their activity in those sites. So all of this new growth that we're going to have, new housing growth, will be new people, but we need the new housing. There's no doubt about that. Should we stop people visiting the Broads and the coast? Probably not feasible, but probably human rights issues as well. We have to manage it. That's what we have to do. Can we adapt people's behaviour to do different things? Yes, we can, is the answer. And if we have enough green infrastructure, open space, walking space, in the right locations, perhaps in less sensitive locations than some of these Natura 2000, to use the jargon, sites across the county, we will be kind of better off and have less pressure on them. So Sue will go into the report, so it assesses the issues and the solutions. You have an officer report which gives you a bit more written background, which people will have read. What I would say, we've done this in very careful cooperation with Natural England, who will talk more about that, I'm sure. And their advice is that it is necessary for local planning authorities to take action pretty much immediately. So doing nothing is not an option. You have a very well considered report, and the recommendations Sue will get to in due course. So that's just a very quick introduction there for me, and I'll leave it to Sue to go through her presentation.
There you go, good. So about 15 minutes, Sue.
You're on mute, Sue.
Apologies. Right. Can everybody see the title page of my presentation? What's he probably going to know?
Purposes, yes. Norfolk Green Infrastructure.
Yep. Okay, I'm trying to juggle between multiple screens. So as long as you can see the screen, that's fine. So the purpose of the strategy that we've been asked to produce for all the Norfolk authorities is a strategic mitigation solution that Natural England have confidence will enable all the authorities to meet their statutory duties and avoid impacts from a range of issues, but focusing on recreational disturbance. And the key will be that all of plans, local plans, will be considered sound. So Alan has touched on the issue of residential growth, which is predicted to result in an increase in people visiting and possibly causing disturbance at the sensitive wildlife sites, these Natura 2000 sites. And these effects can occur from activities as varied as dogs off leads to water sports, which may or may not be in appropriate locations or at appropriate times to avoid that disturbance. So the issue really is twofold: to ensure that Norfolk residents in the future have access to good quality green infrastructure near to where they're living, and that this will meet their daily recreational needs, and that helps avoid excess disturbance at the sensitive wildlife sites. However, as Alan's described, it's not possible to encourage all people to avoid the sites. The coast particularly is a wonderful place to go, and why shouldn't they go there? It's about behaviour. So the idea is that the second strand of this strategy is to deliver a package of measures at the sensitive wildlife sites and encourage appropriate behaviour. So starting with the green infrastructure, Natural England's advice has been very much focused on promoting the provision of what they term suitable, accessible and natural green space within all large new residential developments, but also promote connections to the public rights of way network, so that even if this is small housing schemes that obviously are not large enough to have their own green space within them, that new residents do have access to the enjoyment of nature, but also it means it takes the pressure off the Natura 2000 sites as well. The strategy has identified from all the information it's been provided from all the local authorities and Natural England that the current scale of planned housing does not trigger the need for any new county level provision to mitigate these effects, but that it is really important to understand what quality the existing green infrastructure is across the county. Some of it's wonderful, but some of it may be more mown grass and not provide that natural experience that people get from visiting the Broads or the coast or even the Brecks. And therefore an audit is one of the recommendations that we feel and Natural England believe needs to be undertaken to then identify what enhancements need to be made to those existing sites and potentially explore the potential for strategic opportunities to deliver green infrastructure at a plan level. So we've termed this enhanced green infrastructure as meeting the needs of people and nature across Norfolk. So there's obviously a clear relationship between minimising effects of visitors at the habitat sites, Natura 2000 sites, and offering them a recreational experience that is similar. Obviously you can't recreate something like the coast or the Broads, but the county does have a network of green infrastructure already, and that there is a need to identify what is needed in certain locations, and therefore we feel that this is at a plan making level, not a county level approach. However, enhancements need to be identified at specific visitor destinations. It's important that those sites themselves are not designated as internationally important for wildlife, otherwise you end up with a domino effect. But where these sites can be enhanced, this is where each authority can use its contributions that it already seeks towards green infrastructure to identify, particularly retaining the flexibility to work across boundaries, that this will avoid impacts from the developments alone. This is a map of the green infrastructure and habitats across the county, and it identifies what we call strategic opportunity areas. So this is not lines on a map, it's not identifying specific land parcels. This is in response to where the allocations for new residential growth have been included in local plans, and looked at the deficit or deficiency rather, to avoid regular daily trips to the Natura 2000 sites. The other strand I mentioned is in relation to recreational impacts that occur at the Natura 2000 sites. So this is focused particularly on delivering a package of specific visitor management measures, and we feel that this needs to be funded across the county, and because, as Alan mentioned, impacts from one authority's residents can impact on sites further afield, it is important that it is a strategic approach is taken. This obviously provides multiple advantages for developers, as well as their agents and planning authorities at application stage. And this approach, as I mentioned, is endorsed by Natural England, and there are examples of similar strategies being implemented across England. However, it will be important that emerging local plan policies need to refer to the need for contributions from residential growth towards delivery of this RAMS mitigation scheme. And the plan really is to ensure that the measures are available before new residents occupy their new homes, to ensure that behaviours can be appropriate from day one, so that they don't, or nobody gets into bad habits. So I think this has provided an evidenced approach to seeking developer contributions to ensure that local planned authorities are legally compliant with the government regulations to protect these sites. And we have used visitor survey data that was collected by Footprint Ecology, previous consultancies, which Natural England are happy is the best available. So we haven't required additional surveys at this stage. And this has identified a single, what we're calling a zone of influence, which Natural England has accepted. So zones of influence are described as a designated distance that establishes where development is likely to have a significant effect on a habitat site. These zones of influence were calculated using the postcode origin of visitors from the visitor surveys, and these distances have been calculated using the best practice methodology and identified a distance for each group of sites based on where the closest 75% of visitors come from. So it doesn't include granny visiting from Scotland. And as these individual zones of influences overlap and cover the whole county, Natural England have advised that the authority uses a single zone of influence for this type of development. So as you might be able to see from this slide, there are different colours which show the different individual zones of influence, and it's a bit like a petal of a flower, but not quite. But there is no part of Norfolk that is not within the zone of influence of several of these habitat sites, and therefore we believe that Natural England's view that a single zone of influence will be pragmatic and simplify the situation for planning authorities and applicants alike. So what are we actually talking about in terms of measures to influence visitor behaviour? Well, this is based on a tried and tested menu, but we feel that this has been ensured that it's appropriate for Norfolk. It's not a Tesco's mix, it's a bespoke package of measures, but the key very much to coordinating such a complicated scheme really needs a dedicated officer, which here we've termed a delivery officer, and Natural England are really keen that this is a strategy that is delivered. It's not a document to sit on a shelf. But measures elsewhere in the country have shown that face-to-face communication is key. If people understand what wildlife is available, is at any particular site at any particular time, then they've got a better understanding of how their behaviour may result in adverse impacts. So the package includes provision of rangers who will be mobile and visit the hotspots where there could be conflicts between people and wildlife at various points across the county, and they can then explain and show people the wildlife and aim to influence their behaviour.
Oh, Sue, if I may interrupt you,
Yeah.
there is so much background noise. I don't know whether there's a fan going in the background or your computer's rattling or whatever. It's very difficult to hear you. So if we can just rattle through the slides, and we'll probably just have to read them with minimum stuff, then we can get into a discussion, which Alan might be able to participate.
Usually my
And I think we also have to get into the numbers. So paragraph 2.4 of the report starts to talk about the money. Let's cut to the chase.
Okay,
and then
right.
Graham.
Okay, this is where the measures are, but this is what you want to see. So the package of mitigation has been provisionally costed, as your paper says, in the region of about 7.9 million. This is to ensure delivery of measures for the lifetime of all of the local plans. So we're talking at the moment up to 2038. So the nub of it really is that the recreational disturbance is such that it needs additional contributions, and at the moment, based on figures, and the housing numbers are very nearly finalised, but we're talking about a per dwelling tariff, so every net new dwelling, which is in line with Natural England's advice to each planning authority, at approximately £185. So we're hopeful that we may be able to deliver that final figure soon, but we're not actually able to do that at the moment. But this is a standard contribution which can be secured at application stage, which will be supported by a habitat regulations assessment for each application for residential development, using existing methods or whatever the government deems appropriate. So my last slide really here is summary of the recommendations, and it recommends that each authority commits to deliver enhanced green infrastructure across its jurisdiction. It works flexible to ensure that boundaries and due to cooperate deliver the green infrastructure that's needed, as well as delivering the recreational disturbance measures at the Natura 2000 sites. Obviously, local plan policies need to support this, and at application stage, developer contributions will need to be collected to support lawful decisions as soon as this strategy is adopted by each of the individual authorities. So I think this provides an opportunity to contribute to the needs of both people and nature across the county. That's me done.
Good. Well, I put Stu on mute. Now we can hear ourselves think. So, Alan, did you just want to say anything briefly before I'll take questions, hands up or whatever? And if, Sue, in the meantime, you could slide back to the zone of influence map, I think that would probably help everybody there. So, Alan, over to you.
Well, thank you for putting that up, because what that shows is that everybody is in the same kind of situation. We're all using facilities in other places. But cut to the chase, as you say, John, there is a cost involved in a mitigation package for the whole county. Hence, everybody is proposed to be sharing in that. That figure of £185 or so is the similar figure to the one that we've discussed many times at this group. And I think you will find that's extremely good value. I come back, though, to there not being another option. Natural England can speak for themselves, obviously, but my summary of their position is that something needs to be done to accommodate the housing development across the county and all the interrelationships of people travelling around that go with it. And this is the package that they are content with and thinks will do the job for all of our habitat regulation assessments for our local plans.
Well, let's go to Melanie from the Broads Authority.
Hi. Looking at the tariffs that you were speaking of, will these tariffs apply to holiday homes, hotel rooms, camping pitches, caravan sites for tourism, residential, gypsy and traveller sites and residential moorings?
Mr. Chairman, I've gone back to my headset. Can you hear me?
It's still just as bad, but keep going. You'll just have to talk louder.
Okay, I'll talk louder. I'll get nearer the microphone. The tariff for tourist accommodation is on a 6-bed space basis, which I believe is in line with the existing strategies that are already in place. Correct me if I'm wrong, Alan. Is that what you got in Kings Lynn and West Norfolk? Or was it the Yarmouth one? You're on mute, Alan, sorry.
We do take account, do charge tourism facilities. It's a slightly different process, but the basic point is, yes, you need to do that because they are also people having an impact on visitors for those sensitive sites.
Okay, so I think you've got the answer to that. That's covered in paragraph 2.4 of the report, Melanie.
So can we LPAs charge the tariff now, even though it's not enshrined as policy in local plans yet?
That's a very interesting point. What Natural England are saying is, irrespective of the future development coming forward, although that ramps up year by year by year, obviously we all know how our local plan allocations work. There is a problem. This is arising at the moment, and there isn't a county-wide appropriate response to new development coming forward. So what Natural England are saying is this amount should be charged from this point in time, and the funds should be put towards the projects that are outlined in the report. So irrespective of whether you're doing a local plan tomorrow, new development coming forward today should be charged and should have those measures put in place that Sue has designed.
So that we can have the fun of spending it then. Thank you.
Okay, well, I mean, we've now got on the zone of incidence map, or zone of influence rather, and you look at this and you squint and I mean, Sue, you said, well, just basically looking at all this, it's too difficult, so we're just going to have a single one for Norfolk. I cannot see any circumstance in which case the cloverleaf and the boundaries on this map indicate that conclusion whatsoever. I mean, if you squint, there's a sort of a bit of an east and a west if you take into account the wash. Yeah, the awkward one, of course, is the one that goes all the way halfway to Grimsby. But I just can't see how you can evidentially conclude that there is a single zone of influence for the purpose of charging in Norfolk. I mean, just can't see it. And it's not covered in the report. And I think it'd be very difficult to justify that. And I'm not saying that we should have 200 quid flat rate, for 7.9 million quid in aggregate. But the logical conclusion of that is that Melanie's got her hand up again. If there's a single zone of influence, it could all be spent in the Broads. There'd be nothing for the West. Well, that's just wholly unsatisfactory. And I'm not suggesting with sort of 7 different or how many, 8 or 9 different zones, we should split it into 8 or 9 zones. But one just doesn't work at all for me. But who knows? Graham, you've probably got a different view. What do you reckon?
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm concurring with what you're saying, actually, and this money that's raised. I mean, we had enough trouble getting the sill in place, trying to put money on property as it's being built. We're now going to talk about another tax in place. We've also talked in the past about having a tourism tax as well, which is still in the ether, if you like, but is there waiting in the background to jump and bite us. But this is again another tax on people coming to Norfolk. And I'm not sure who employs these 5 people. Is it a new body that's set up? Is it, and if they employ them, is it on the tax? Is it based on these new taxes that you're talking about implementing on tourism and on the buildings, or any new buildings?
Yep.
Okay. I mean,
let's take that, and then
layer upon layer, as we're seeing this now on the zones of influence, but it's layer upon layer of more bureaucracy, trying to get something built.
Indeed. Helen Crane, why don't you come in, and then we'll go back to Alan and Sue.
Thank you for letting me to speak. And as you know, this is all very new to me, and I have read all the documents, but and perhaps I'm not understanding this as well as I should. But it appears as like one size fits all. Now, if this rams money, does that mean that it's ring fenced to each authority, or is this about bringing all that money into one pot? And then how do you equalise the spending? Because obviously with the BREX, it's very important that we do have access to the BREX for our tourism, etc.
Yeah, Sam. So Helen, you're from Breckland. Sam, you're from Yarmouth. What do you think?
Sorry, I wasn't going to answer the question just raised by Helen. I was just going to respond to some of the concerns raised by Councillor Graham Plant, if that's okay.
Go on, yeah.
So just to provide some reassurance, in Great Yarmouth, following the adoption of the core strategy, we had this very similar issue whereby we noticed that as a result of development, principally residential development, but also to a lesser extent tourist development in the area, could have an impact on the little town colonies at North Deans and Winterton. And as a result, what we had to do to get around that is introduce a similar type of strategy, but just local to Great Yarmouth. And for a number of years now, I think the last 2 years, we've been charging £110 per dwelling, slightly less for tourist accommodation because it's based on a larger number of beds before the charge sets in. But that's been working quite well. Developers aren't too concerned about £110 per dwelling. It's very low in comparison to the overall build costs of the property, and it's working so far. So this proposal here would essentially replace what we're doing in Great Yarmouth. So it's not going to be £185 on top of the existing 110. It would be replacing the 110 with 185. But what it will also address is any potential impacts on some of those other designated areas close to Great Yarmouth, such as the Broads and elsewhere.
Okay, Trevor, and then we'll go back to Alan and or Sue. So, Trevor.
Yeah, I was just going to try and answer a few of those questions. Just about the zone of influence, I think the way you need to look at this map is you need to look at each district in turn and look at how many of the circles overlap that particular district. And if you look at that, you'll see that every district has at least 4 circles overlapping its area, which means that it has 4 of the Natura 2000 sites within its boundaries, which, you know, residents will impact those sites. So given that, I think that it ranges from about 4 to 6 for each authority. That indicates, based on the Natural England advice, that the best practice would be to have a single tariff for the whole county, because wherever you put a house, it'll have an influence which covers a number of the Natura 2000 sites.
Well, Trevor, I'm just going to have to hold you up there. That is just totally and utterly ridiculous, because it isn't how many circles live where you are. It's what is the proportion of areas that aren't near you? I mean, where Graham is in Great Yarmouth, he's nothing to do with the Roys and Dersingham. He's nothing to do with the Wash or the North Coast.
Absolutely,
So I mean, there's no doubt that you might say, well, just finger in the air, 200 quid for every house, which is basically what we're talking about, round numbers. But you're going to have to spend that in at least 2 zones of influence, because they sort of break down into 2 groups of 4. You just can't say, oh, because there's 2 families. There's an East family and there's a West family, basically, and you can see that just by squinting at the map. And it's a point that's been raised by Helen from Breckland.
Well, the idea is that there's economies of scale, because we can employ 5. The idea is to answer another question that came up. The idea is to bring all this into one pot, and the package of measures that are being put forward are ones that cover the whole of the county. So they cover all the Natura 2000 sites. There would be a range of, there'd be 5 ranges, and the idea is they would go around to all the Natura 2000 sites to deal with the mitigation there. All of the packages are for every site. That there's not specifics for individual ones, although there is a single separate pot for individual projects on sites. But the idea is that there's economies of scale to bring this all together and to use those ranges across all of the sites. If we were to split it out, you wouldn't get that benefit, and it could end up with a higher tariff. So the idea is to bring it all together. Wherever you put a house, it will have an influence on different Natura 2000 sites, but it will still have an influence on the same or a similar number of sites. And so therefore there's in similar way to the fact that Suffolk have done the same thing and Essex have done the same thing, there's the benefit in pulling the package together and doing it as a single tariff.
Let's answer Graham's question. So what proportion of the 7 or 8 million quid is going to be spent on staff costs over the 20-year life of the plan? Sounds like all of it is.
Staffing costs do take up a fair amount of it, yes, but there's a number of different schemes that are within the package, and we will provide details of everything that is in the package before it has to be signed off at an individual local authority level.
Can I just suggest this is unlikely to carry any favour whatsoever with the planning authorities sitting in this room, and the best way of doing it is to work out the 8 million quid and divvy it up in proportion to districts, and then the districts as planning authorities can put it towards capital programmes within their district, part of their existing thing, and then we will then deliver those capital programmes as we are used to doing other things, other mitigations, whether it be whatever.
Chairman, sorry to interrupt you, but I am going to have to go shortly because I've got a Policy and Resources Committee meeting coming up at Great Yarmouth. But something I was looking at during the presentation of the report, and that is its mitigation to allow holidaymakers who may be coming here to go and view something else other than a site of interest to them, which might be a seal population, or it might be a tern, or it might be something that they've come, birds, whatever, I don't know. We have a bigger issue going on in Norfolk at the moment, and that's flooding. And this is covering a huge swathe of the area, which we're trying to find money to deal with. And at the time when we're trying to find money to deal with flooding, and we're trying to deal with COVID, and we're trying to deal with everything else, to try and add another layer on top of it all, and try to persuade holidaymakers that they shouldn't go and look at this, they should go and look at that, is a little bit, well, it's a bit of madness as far as I'm concerned. People come here to see what they want to see. They visit a place for the wonders it has, and Norfolk has a great many wonders, and you're not going to scare people away by fencing off a particular area that they've come to see by saying, oh no, you shouldn't be looking at that, go and look at this, and we've put a beautiful mitigation in place for you. I'm struggling with this, I really am, but
Mark Ashwell. Good. So we've heard what Graham thinks, and I must say I do agree with him, but Mark, what do you think?
Mark, you're on mute.
So I just wanted to talk about the zones of influence and how they're being promoted and how they're going to be used. I think it's important to distinguish between zones of influence being used for the collection of the tariff, and I think they're a perfectly sensible way of cooperating and collecting a sum of money. What they don't determine is how the local authorities agree to spend the proceeds. So there's it might well be that when the tariffs are introduced, we look at these zones of influence and say, let's divide the pot into 3 equal bits and spend it, agree that we spend it in 3 equal areas, because there is no connection between the deans and the wash or whatever. I don't think we should confuse what these zones of influence are doing. They are saying everywhere in that area will have some sort of impact, and in order to address that impact, we ought to collect a standard tariff. Administratively, it must be sensible that we all do it together. I mean, this is a cracking example of where we should be cooperating. And I would view this as a way of enabling development. If we don't do this, there's a risk that development will not be able to happen. We will run into legal problems. Natural England will say, you cannot do this because you've not managed to mitigate the impacts in a lawful way. They will challenge our local plans and they will prevent development from happening. That's the risk here. So it's in everybody's interest to collect what are very modest amounts of money and then spend them in a sensible way to enable development to happen.
Yeah, Mark. Okay, so let's just unpack that. We are being presented in the accompanying paper with a figure not unadjacent to £8 million and to recruit 5 staff to do it. Well, with on-costs, travel, everything else, 5 staff could be 200 grand, national insurance, pension contributions. Let's just put a conservative figure of £200,000 per year for that. Times 20 years is £4 million. I don't think there's any member in this room who's going to sign on to a tax, an additional burden, and Graham has made the point very eloquently, where half of it is going to be spent on staff costs. So, and if that's the case, if the only outcomes of that would be £4 million worth of stuff, well, let's set it at £4 million and just delegate it out. I don't think anyone's against raising the money, but raising the money on the premise that we're just going to have half of it go away in staff costs is a false premise. So I think you guys need to go away and take this steer and come back with a modified proposal. If it is going to be around £200 per year, and we've heard evidence in this call from Yarmouth and elsewhere that £200 hardly worth fighting, it's sort of in the mix. Let's work out a program that delivers that sort of amount of goods, but with the minimal amount of administration. Hiring this just to hire even more bureaucrats, I'm afraid, is not going to be the way forward. So I think that's the challenge we need to lay down to Trevor and Sue and everybody else, and then probably to work out apportionment, at least as I squint at this map on the screen, and east-west, there might even be, as you say, Mark, 3 areas. The Norfolk coast, the northwest coast, the southwest coast, and the east. I'm pretty agnostic about that, but if we're going to raise £200 per dwelling house across the whole board, let's work out how we're going to spend it in a way that isn't just bureaucrats. There we are. Trevor, and then Sue, and then we'll move on.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to come back on a couple of points. Firstly, there was the point raised about putting up fences and keeping people away. This is really not what it's about. It's about making sure people enjoy the sites in the best way, which doesn't impact the wildlife. And I just want to highlight on what these are. These are ranges. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to be sticking up fences. We don't want to be putting up signs saying keep out. What we want to do is we want to have people there that can educate the people that come and tell them how to enjoy the site in an effective way without disturbing the wildlife. And Sue's probably going to say something similar, but there is other countless similar exercises that have been completed across the country which highlight the benefit of having rangers. They're not bureaucrats. They're there to inform people about how to go to a site without impacting it. And that is why we were proposing to employ people in this role. But it's very, very much not about telling people to go away. It's about telling them to enjoy the site in the correct way to avoid disturbing the wildlife.
You're digging yourself a hole, Trevor. I mean, that sounds even worse. We're telling people to enjoy themselves. And if you can have 5 ranges, Norfolk's 80 miles by 5, where are these ranges going to be? I mean, this is just hopeless. I think, you know, this needs to go away and start again, guys. If 200 quid is the target, that's fine. But you can either deliver it with capital goods through things we already have in our existing local plans, or work with charities if necessary. But let's not employ council officers to tell people how to enjoy themselves. Sue, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me? I'll try and speak up. The key here is that Natural England will expect those appropriate measures to be delivered at the habitat sites that are predicted to have impacts at. So there will be a link, a specific link, and this will need to go in the legal agreement to support any decisions as to the location of the development and the location of predicted impacts. That's where the spend has to be, and it has to be appropriate measures. So I would echo Trevor's thoughts that this is about one of the most effective measures at avoiding impacts at wildlife sites has been proven to be face-to-face communications. You need educated wildlife people, not bureaucrats, placed on these sites, building up a rapport with the site managers and people who visit regularly, that they can understand they're part of the solution, not the problem. Thank you.
Lana.
Hi. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit stunned. So, for example, the place that I visit a lot is Winterton, which during the little tern season is readily patrolled by the RSPB, and during the seal breeding season there are the seal rangers. So, where in between do work that is actually already done really well by charities that are really well supported locally, that are really well known to local people and visitors. So where in between does this bit of work fit? And I don't understand. Chairman, I'm kind of with you. This needs to go back. And
yeah, I think we just need to look. We've got the I mean, I am not a card-carrying member of the RSPB, certainly not the Broads Authority, but I do understand the RSPB has wardens. The Norfolk Wildlife Trust has wardens. You've got the Broads Authority that has rangers. I'm sure there are elsewhere. I think we can prolong this conversation. I think the way I think we're landing, guys, is that if on the basis of 200 quid or 185 quid as a general quantum, we can make a meaningful contribution to hitting this Natura thing. Then if that's what it is, that's what it is. But in terms of spending it, we need to absolutely go right back to basics, back to square one, and think how we're going to engage what there is already, to your point, Lana, and also to Graham's and everybody else who's spoken, the wardens and everything else, rather than reinventing the wheel. And I think if anybody disagrees with that, now's the time to put it in the chat. Otherwise, I think we can talk ourselves in and out all afternoon. But this is back to the drawing board, guys. Hiring 5 staff from the councils just to float around and duplicate what's happening already is just a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so this will. Your hand is up. Did you want to say anything? But
just as a closing remarks, I'm more than happy to do whatever the Norfolk authorities ask me to do, but Natural England will expect the measures in the package to be the most effective, and we'll see where that takes us.
I think where this meeting is landing is that we are the least people as planning authorities and planners. We're the least effective people at sorting it out when we've got existing people we work with, whether it be the Broads, the RSPB, Norfolk Wildlife Trust, or anybody else. And there's another one in the Brex, Helen tells us in the chat, to do all this. And if that's what it is, let's engage and see what they would want, rather than just sort of say, well, let's knee-jerk hire 5 staff. That's unacceptable. So back to the drawing board, Trevor, and I'm sure you'll come back next time and see what we're going to do.
Can I just highlight one final point? All of the people you listed there were involved in putting together the mitigation measures. And the other point that was raised about certain sites which already have ranges, well, what we need to make very clear here is this is the net increase in visitors that are going to be caused by new dwellings. So it's not about anything that's there already in place at existing sites. This is to deal with the additional people that will be caused by new homes being built. And we also have to bear in mind there's 40, I think it's something like 40 Natura 2000 sites. Not all of them have the capacity to have ranges all of the time. So this is to try and fill in those gaps and deal with the additional people caused by new development. Thank you.
Back to the drawing board. Let's see what happens next time. Okay, so that one lasted a lot longer than we thought. So we haven't come to a conclusion on that, save that in quantum, I don't think anyone's mind, disagreeing with the quantum of 200 quid-ish, but a more granular approach to working with the people we've got at the moment and understanding how we might do that. You better come back with some more proposals. But the recommendation, I'll just put it formally, is anyone happy with the recommendation that's on the supporting paper? The strategy is recommended to planning authorities for approval. I'm certainly not going to propose it. I don't know else who does want to, but now's the time to put your hand in the chat. No, so it's back to square one, I'm afraid, guys. We need to have a much more granular approach, which delivers stuff that we can actually work with the people we've got and touch and see, rather than just more COVID mumbles telling us not to go to restaurants. Right, next one, climate change. Keith Moore.
He was still muted, but not now. Thank you, Chair.
Well done. Well done.
Yes, yes.
Now, I'm afraid that I've got to go at 3:30, which I must admit, lousy chairman on my part. And I think Richard Blunt from King's Lynn was going to step into my shoes, unless somebody else wants to step forward. Good to be Richard. Then over to you. But in the meantime, Keith, welcome.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Right, okay. Mindful of time, and obviously there's been some quite lengthy discussions previously. I hadn't planned to take a lot of time up, which will be music to ears of people who are watching the time that we have remaining. I'm aware there was a previous discussion about some of this work at the previous meeting, so I wasn't planning to go through this document line by line. That would just be futile and a waste of time. I really wanted to just introduce the document. It's been circulated both to this group and people who are unable to attend today. It is an update on the work that's been carried out by the excellent group of planners who've got together as a subcommittee to look at the role of planning in climate change, how the work they're doing in Norfolk aligns with the National Planning Policy Framework, and actually looking at the role of the planning through the local planning authorities in Norfolk to support some of the other wider Norfolk initiatives that are taking place, both in the private sector and in the public sector through the Norfolk Climate Change Partnership, Norfolk's environment policy, and Councillor Plant touched earlier on the challenges around flood risk as well. So I would commend everybody to read the paper. I think that the few points I did want to bring out, Chair, before opening it up, as I say, for any kind of discussion or feedback on the paper. One is the introduction is just where very clearly the team have set out the role of if you like, of planning as a function within the county of Norfolk, and actually that it is part of the solution. Planning itself is not a solution, but it has a key part to join with, as I say, other initiatives that are taking place, other funding streams, etc., to provide that support through the planning system. I do want to draw members' attention and those attending to the two agreements, Recommendation 1 and Recommendation 2, which I think have previously been discussed, but I do want to just highlight that they are in the document. And I think the final bit that I wanted to say was, again, commend having a look at just Section 5, which picks out and certainly feeds back some of the discussion from the previous meeting around energy efficient, some of the environment stuff within there, and some of the how we in Norfolk support some of the new technologies that are rolling out across transport. specifically stuff that was talked about at Cabinet and about the EV work that's going on with WSP, both within Norwich City and more widely across the county. So it fits, I think, the work this group has been doing with the wider stuff. There is obviously a lot more behind this than in the document. It's a big enough document as it is, but clearly there is a lot of supporting evidence, both locally and nationally, that supports some of the, not just the recommendations, but some of the findings in Section 5. And Chair, I think, mindful of time, I'll leave that there and hand that either to yourself or Councillor Blunt to open up for discussion.
Okay, I haven't seen Richard yet, so whilst we go back and find Richard and Nina's there, I think one of the things that's come out in the last month, and we're still not out of the woods yet, Keith, is that it's not just about consuming less carbon. No. It's about adapting. Absolutely. And flooding. And I think whatever happens, the way in which we plan flooding, LLFA work, enforcement of riparian rights absolutely has to come up the agenda, because it isn't just about the environment, it's about our environment where we live. Yeah. And I think there's been a lot on climate change, and in fact, look, hey, this whole paper is framed in terms of climate change. Actually, shouldn't it just be climate adaptation as much as everything, and ensuring that all our stuff protects the people who are here? Mm-hmm. Because I've certainly had to mop up for people over the Christmas period, and others are. And we've got to be really focused on that.
Yeah, I think I would. Yeah, my response to that would be that flooding and increased amounts of flooding and frequency of flooding is certainly a manifestation of a changing climate, and a whole variety of other things as well. Behind this paper does sit that whole, actually, that it is about that adaptation, because previously we focused collectively, I think, in the county and elsewhere, around mitigation. So it's reducing carbon outputs, it's trying to reduce that carbon footprint, it's looking at alternative energies, etc. But the reality is that, equally there's a balance there, and it is about adaptation, and the response to that changing climate and the frequency of flood risk and how it impacts on our communities, including the one that I actually live in, is absolutely critical. So, and it does pull out some of that adaptation, and it's looking about essentially ensuring that going forward, some of the development that takes place, if you like, is pre-adapted. So it's in that position to respond to some of those challenges. What it can't do through planning, and that is some of the wider county initiatives, has yet to be discussed in totality, I think, is actually what you do about some of the existing settlements, how they're retrofitted, etc. In terms of resilience, not just in terms of energy footprint as well. So, yeah, I would comment that adaptation is very much at the core of this, but within the remit of the planning system to deliver that, and more importantly, for the resilience of future development going ahead.
Well, I'll pass over to Richard now. Say that if this is called climate change in the planning system, planning does have an enforcement role, and enforcing of riparian rights is something which I think we're all going to have to start to spend a bit more time on, because it's been neglected. As everyone's chased sort of greenhouse issues, we've neglected some of that stuff at home. Right, Richard, where are you? Can you come on screen?
I'm here. I'm on screen somewhere.
Okay. There you are. I've got you now. So I'll turn off. Apologies to have to go, but there we are. Okay.
Right. I can't see anybody. Has anybody got any questions for a start? I'm looking for anybody with anything in chat. Do we need to actually accept these recommendations at this stage, or what?
I'm just going to hand that over to Trevor, because obviously the recommendations, Chair, actually are part of the wider update. I'm sure Trevor's going to give around the Norfolk Strategic Planning Framework. So, Trevor, if I can just ask you to come in on the remit of this paper versus the stuff you're going to do with the update to the NSPF.
Yeah, as Keith said, the recommendations are within the NSPF, so subject to the NSPF being agreed, those recommendations will form part of that. So
we don't need to formally accept them at this point in the agenda. Right, has anybody got any questions? I can't see anybody. Anything for Keith? No? Okay. We'll move on to the next. Thank you very much, Keith, for that. And,
yes, thanks, Chair. And obviously, if anybody does think of anything separately, and those people who have had to leave the meeting or couldn't attend today, then by all means do fire some stuff across, because I think it is an ongoing debate and it's absolutely important. with the additional factors that the outgoing chairs just mentioned, and that Councillor Plant mentioned at Cabinet on the 12th of January. So thank you for that, and thank you for the time to present today.
Right. Okay, well, now we'll move on to our item 6 on the agenda, which is the Norfolk Strategic Plan Framework draft document. Trevor, I think that's with you.
Yes, absolutely. So just a reminder of what we are and why we're doing this. The idea of updating the NSPF at this moment in time is to support the 3 local plans that are likely to come forward this year for inspection. As you may remember, I presented the new version of the document back at the member forum we held in December. Now, since then, we took on board all the feedback that was put forward, and what we've also done is talk to the signatories of the document, which are the likes of Natural England, Environment Agency, the New Anglia LEP, and various others, to get their feedback on the document as well. And so Ninan sent around the new version of the document last week, which takes on board all the feedback from the member forum and from the signatories, to the version that we're now putting forward, which we're hoping we can put forward for endorsement to each authority. So what I will do, though, is I'll just go through with you the changes that we've made off the feedback that we've received. So I'm going to try and share my screen now. Hopefully that will work. Can everyone see the document? I'm hoping so.
Yep, I see it.
Yep, super. Okay. So we had some feedback at the last forum about there was an objective which talked about car use. So we've taken that on board and we've changed the wording there. So we've changed it to reducing unnecessary car use and supporting the rollout of new technologies such as electric vehicles and alternative fuels, and alternative methods of transport, including public transport, walking and cycling. So hopefully that takes into account the comments that we received before. I'm gonna not pick out every single change that's been made, but obviously the document is there for anyone to look at, and all the changes that have been made are highlighted in a different colour to see. But what I will point out the key major ones that we've made. And the next one that I wanted to pick out was the changes to the section 5, which is the economic section. So we had some feedback at the member forum in December about the fact that we hadn't got quite so much information in there now about the sectors as we perhaps should have. So we've included a new section now that goes into quite a lot of detail about the different sectors. And I'll bring that onto the screen now. So that this is the section with the new sectors in, and all the key sectors for Norfolk are covered in that section. As I say, I'm not going to go over it in any sort of detail, given that we're a bit short of time. The other thing that we also added in there, the economic section, is there was a request to put some more information in about the impacts of the coronavirus. So we've included further details in here about the impacts on each sector of the coronavirus. There's another section in there about that. The next thing I'll just highlight is that there was discussions around the elderly, and obviously we've had a conversation about that already this afternoon, but we just added a little bit more detail into the document to cover the work that's happened around the elderly study. So I've got that on the screen now, just a few additional words in there to take into account the feedback we received previously. Okay, I'll just point out some other changes. So there was also a request to add in some additional information into the healthy living and wellbeing section. So we included some more Norfolk related information on health and wellbeing and healthy living. That's that section there. And we've also included some additional small wording changes into the climate change section as well, based on the feedback that we had before. Also, in addition to that, we've had some more information from Anglian Water. They are one of the signatories, and they've provided us with some up-to-date information around the water work that they have got underway, including a number of new key initiatives. So we've included some work in there around that. It was also requested at the last forum that we had Water Resources East as a new signatory. They're happy to come on board as a new signatory, but they have requested, and if anyone attended the October member forum, you may remember we had Robin Price, who attended from Water Resources East, and he asked if all local authorities would be happy to become members. There's no cost in doing so, but you have to sign a letter of agreement. So we put in a new agreement in the document to suggest that local authorities will be happy to become members of Water Resources East. That was certainly the indication that was given at the last or the October member forum, that everyone was happy to come on board with that anyway. So hopefully that one's okay. There was a request as well from Councillor Plant that we updated the wording of section what was agreement 24. It's now agreement was 23. It's now agreement 24. So we've changed the wording around making sure new developments have fibre to the premises. So that's the new agreement in there. And we've also just made some small changes to the work programme for next year. Actually, before we get to that, I will just highlight that we're looking to get a new signatory, the Marine Management Organisation, on board. And after feedback received from them, they highlighted that the document didn't have a lot of information about the work that goes on from a sort of coastal level. So we've added a new section in there to cover coastal and marine planning, which covers the work of Coastal Partnership East. It covers the shoreline management plans, the marine plan that the MMO actually deal with themselves. And then there's a new agreement in there to highlight the work of the MMO and the sort of crossover and cross-boundary issues between their work and this Norfolk strategic work as well. So we've added that in. And then, as I just said, finally, there was just some additional changes to the proposed work going forward. Obviously, since we had the meeting in December, there's been the government announcement that they're not changing the standard methodology. So some of the work we'd proposed around that now isn't potentially required. It was also mentioned that there's a proposal in the GI work that we're doing to carry out some additional work to identify what enhancements could be made to the green infrastructure that exists in the county. So we've added that into the document as well. So they are the proposals in terms of the changes that we're proposing to make. So I'm happy to take any comments or feedback on that. What we'd like to do is obviously get to the point where we can propose this document to be taken back to each individual authority for endorsement. So I'd be keen to understand if we feel we're happy to recommend that now.
Okay, thank you. You've obviously had a lot of work since we last met. A lot of changes have gone in there. Right, have we again? I can't. Has anybody got any questions for Trevor at this point? I'm very quiet. I can't see anybody. No. It's going to be very quick. You're doing well here, Trevor.
Good.
Right. Well, then, really, if obviously the changes that we talked about in the previous meeting have all been included in there. Are you saying that have we got to all authorities have got to join Water Resources East? Are you telling us that exactly?
Some authorities already are. The Broads are actually on the board. a board of Water Resources East, and there are, I think, 3 authorities that have already joined. Now, all it requires is signing a letter on the headed paper of the authority to say that you would like to become a member, and you have to commit £1, I think it is, should the Water Resources East go into liquidation. So there isn't a huge commitment on anyone's part, but it does give you the ability to vote on key issues and become a member and have key input into the decisions and operations that they make. So they're very keen to encourage everyone to do so. And I'm quite happy to work with officers to make sure that every other authority that isn't already a member comes on board with it as well.
Okay, then I'll assume that each authority will get on and do that as required, if unless someone is quickly stating that they don't want to. Again, can't say any further any questions at all? Because otherwise, I'm going to go back and say, can we accept this document and allow us, and all of us take it forward to our own authorities? We got anybody objecting to that? To do that? Can't see anybody. I can't see much on my screen, I've got to say. So unless you're in chat, I'm not going to be able to pick you up. I'm seeing nothing in chat at the moment. So I'm assuming you're all in agreement that we take this forward, and we've recommended it to our own authorities. What's the timescale for that, Trevor? Do you want that to be done by?
We're looking to try and get it done before PERDA. That means that any local plan that comes forward, as I say, for inspection over the course of this year has got this document to sort of demonstrate the duty to cooperate.
Right. Okay. Well, we're assuming that's going to happen yet. We still haven't got confirmation of that yet, which may slip a period. But anyway,
yep.
Well, we need to get it done as soon as possible. Right. As none of you have said anything or objected to it, I'm going to say that we now approve this to go forward. Nina, are you happy with that? No?
Sorry, are you speaking to me, Councillor Blanche?
Yeah, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I've noted that, yeah.
Right, okay, I've got one chat hand come up. Where have I got that? I can't see that either. What's that?
That's me, Helen Crane.
Yes,
yes, hello there. Yes, I will take this back, but obviously I'm standing in for Paul Clausen as his ESM. He hasn't said otherwise not to take it back, or has asked me to note anything, so I will take it back, subject to him not disapproving of anything, if that makes any sense.
Right. Okay. Well, he was at the last meeting. I believe
he was, and
yeah. I think
he
did go. We did go through the majority of the document at that stage.
Yeah. So as far as I'm aware, that should be fine. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Lara, I've seen you come onto the screen. Have you got anything to say? No? Right. Okay, then we're going to move on then. Well, Trevor, that was painless for you.
Great. Thank you.
Right. Have we got a neighbouring counties update next?
Yes, we do. We have a representative from Suffolk, Cameron Clough.
Afternoon. Can everyone hear me and see me?
Hi, Cameron. Yes.
Great. So I'm Cameron Clough. I'm a planning officer at Suffolk County Council, and I'm just basically going to give you an overview of what's happened recently with local plans in Suffolk and what the next steps might be. So just going through my bullet point list here, going back a little while now, but in July 2020, the Suffolk Minerals and Waste Local Plan was adopted by Suffolk County Council. So that contains policies and site allocations for the provision of sand and gravel, and to manage any waste or other minerals applications that come to the county. In September of 2020, the Suffolk Coastal Local Plan was adopted. So that now means that the District of East Suffolk is fully covered in terms of up-to-date local plans, and their main streams of work are on implementing those plans now. The Ipswich local plan is currently undergoing examination. It was submitted around mid-2020 and the public hearings took place in December. The Borough Council is now just waiting for recommendations from the inspectors. Both West Suffolk and Bayborough Mid Suffolk District Councils completed regulation. Well, West Suffolk did a Regulation 18 consultation, which finished in December last year. That's in issues and options, so they're quite early in making the first local plan for the whole West Suffolk district. And Bayborough Mid Suffolk jointly undertook a Regulation 19, so that's a submission draft consultation for the Bayborough Mid Suffolk joint local plan. They're currently going through the representations they've received and preparing statements of common ground with relevant bodies and partners, and they're aiming to submit that to the Secretary of State later this year, and are also hoping for examination later this year as well. That's the update from Suffolk. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Right, anybody got any questions? Helen, your hand is up. Is that an old question? You're old.
That's an old hand.
That's an old hand, right? I'll let you remove your hand then. Just press the button here. Right. Okay. Anybody else got anybody got any questions? No.
I think Steve Faulkner put his hand up.
Sorry,
Stephen. I think Stephen Faulkner's got his hand up.
Right. Again, I can't see it, but Stephen.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was just going to ask Cameron if he could say a little bit about the draft supplementary planning document Suffolk County Council are preparing for Lowestoft. I think it's in relation to some major housing within the Lowestoft area.
Oh, I think you're referring to the master plan for the North Lowestoft Garden neighbourhood. Yes, so there's a consultation ongoing for development of around 1,300 houses just north of Lowestoft. I believe that consultation closes mid-February. There's also an equivalent consultation going on for a site west of Mildenhall as well.
Thanks, Cameron.
Right. Anybody else? Well, thanks, Cameron, for that. That was very good. We'll have a lot to do at this time at the moment. Right, I'm going to go on then to item 8, which is the local plan update. I assume each of the officers want to give us an update on what's happening in their own regions, or so who wants to start? Come on, one of you make a start. Alan, you can give us an update for a start. I know you.
Well, thank you, Chairman. We are getting awfully close to starting the internal process to get our local plan review before Cabinet. That's something we're currently planning to do for around about March time. So that will enable us then hopefully to go on to formally publish the local plan and get on our way to having the examination. So that's really the focus of our work at the moment. And as my colleagues and other members will know, it's quite a time-consuming kind of event. So that is taking a lot of our effort at the moment. Thank you.
Right. Anybody else? What about you guess I can see a hand, but I can't.
Councillor Platt, you have Melanie and you also have fellow Paul Harris.
All right, Melanie.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to say that obviously a lot of the local plans that come on the part of the Broads land is in their village or town. The standard is getting so high, it's really impressive, the thought that's going into it and the incredible amount of work that people are putting into their neighbourhood plans. It's really valuable to have that entrenched, in the future as their opinion of what their village must be like or their town must be like. And it's really worthwhile putting a lot of effort into it because it works. It's really good. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you very much for that. Yes, I agree. And there's a lot of work goes into all of these local plans. Paul.
Yes, hello, Mr. Chairman. As you were asking around for updates, I thought I'd put my hand up just to make myself easier to identify. For those in the meeting that don't know me, my name's Paul Harrison. I'm the place shaping manager for South Norfolk and Broadland Council. So you'll have seen in the paper that have been distributed that we're just on the cusp of going out to publication on the Regulation 19 version of the Greater Norwich local plan. So that's the local plan that covers the combined areas of Broadland, Norwich and South Norfolk. Hopefully you've had a chance to see some of that documentation. If not, it will all be out in the public domain fairly soon, with the Regulation 19 planned for between the 1st of February and the 15th of March. All things being well, after the end of that consultation, will then be out to a formal submission later this year. One thing to note from papers that have circulated, and I don't know why this submission has happened, so my apologies for it, but there is a second plan in production for South Norfolk at the moment. That's the South Norfolk Village Clusters Housing Allocations Plan, so a sort of offshoot that was decoupled from the Greater Norwich local plan at the back end of 2019, dealing with villages within South Norfolk, as the title implies, and we hope to be out for a Regulation 18 consultation on that before the summer, so springtime around May.
Thank you for that, Paul. Right, anybody else wanted to? I need help because I can't see who's hand is up.
We have Andrew Darcy, and then followed by Sam, and then by Nick.
Right, Andrew Darcy then, please. And yes, please.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Andy Darcy. I'm the Planning Policy Manager on behalf of Breckland. Just by way of update, we are going to formally recommence work on the review of the local plan that's already adopted. Starting now and in the new year, moving forward into spring. We've yet to agree a new timetable for it. This really follows the publication or confirmation of the housing numbers, which is the late item on the agenda. Means that we can now move forward on certain aspects of the review. And the neighbourhood plan terms, the only update really is the same Tony neighbourhood plan is now at examination. So we hope to move that forward towards finalisation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Right, Sam Hubbard.
Thanks, Chairman. My name is Sam Hubbard. I'm Strategic Planning Manager at Great Yarmouth Borough Council. And in terms of our local plan update, the final piece of the Great Yarmouth local plan jigsaw, the local plan part 2, is currently being examined by the planning inspector. We hope to have our hearings in early March, starting from the 2nd of March, but over an elongated period going into April due to the availability of the inspector. So with a fair wind, we'd hopefully have an inspector's report by sometime in the summer and hopefully be able to adopt it in the autumn. And at that point, we'll have a complete local plan for Great Yarmouth.
Oh, getting close. Right. I've got, is it Nick Johnson next?
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Nick Johnson. I'm Head of Planning at Norfolk County Council. Just to say, we're working hard on our submission draft of the revised Minerals and Waste Local Plan, hoping to have that submitted for examination later this year. And I think it's fair to say we've been hit a little bit by COVID on the staff, so it's taken us longer than we would like, but so we anticipate getting that submitted later this year.
Thanks, Nick. All right, and now Judith Davison.
Yeah, thank you. Just put my camera on. Yeah, I just, from a Norwich's point of view, we're obviously involved in the Greater Norwich local plan. The other thing I just wanted to mention was that we're hope to be starting work on the master plan for East Norwich, a new district of the city, and that we're in the process of appointing consultants, and that'll be going to our cabinet in February, so I can't say at the moment who they are, but work should commence in March on a master plan to inform development in East Norwich and to support the policy in the Greater Norwich local plan. And as part of that, we'll be the consultants will be producing a supplementary planning document to guide that development, to support the policies, so we can report back on that as things progress.
That sounds exciting. Right, okay. Anybody else? I've got no other hands up at the moment. Right, okay, I'm going to move on then. We have the additional item about the housing delivery tests. Who is, I'm not sure, it's not on my agenda, but I said that at the start we mentioned it, so.
Yeah, I'm happy to cover that one if you like.
Right, okay, come on then, Trevor.
So I will just share my screen again. I can do so. It's not coming up with the right one. Right, if I run the slide. Can you see a housing delivery test slide?
Yes, see that.
Okay, so just a brief bit of background here. The government have recently published the results of the 2020 housing delivery test. It's used to, there's a measurement in place to which they use, which basically looks at the last 3 years housing delivery, covering the last 3 financial years. And this is mapped against the housing that should have been delivered for the last 3 years based on either the local plan or the housing need figure, depending on various certain conditions, which I won't go into any sort of detail. Because of the this obviously covers the latest figures cover the period up until 2019 to 2020, so up until April last year. And because part of that period, just the very end, included the first lockdown, the government have reduced the requirement for the last financial year from 12 months housing delivery to just 11 to help authorities where disruption was caused to housing delivery at the end of that period. For those that don't know, there's various consequences as a result of not meeting the housing delivery test. So if your housing falls below 90% of the target of what you should be delivering, then you have to have an action plan in place. If it goes below 85%, then you have to have a 20% buffer over your current 5-year land supply. And if it falls below 75%, there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development. And I'll move on to the next slide, which
I thought it was 95%.
95% for an action plan. So if your housing falls below, if your housing falls below 95%, yeah, you have to have an action plan in place.
Right.
Yep. So I've got on the screen now the housing delivery test results from 2019 and the ones just published for 2020. And it shows an improved position over where we were last year. So
I can't see that on my screen, actually.
Oh, okay. Can anyone else see the new slide?
No, it's not up yet, Trevor.
No.
Let's try.
That's it.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll just put that up. Can you see that now? Yeah. Okay, so it shows an improved position. In the previous results, both Great Yarmouth and Kingsland and West Norfolk had fallen below the 85% mark and had to have the buffer in place. But the new figures for Great Yarmouth, their delivery's now gone up to 104%. So there's no action required, and Kingsland and West Norfolk are only just below the 95% mark. So they'll continue to have an action plan, but they have already got one in place anyway. So it's a much better position overall for the county. Not really much more else to say, but if anyone else wants to ask any questions, then please let me know.
Right, I'm leaving. Nicky, you got a question? Your hand is up. No, I have a question for you, Trevor. What do you think is going to happen for this coming year? Because I think that's much more. In some ways, it's where in fact we're seeing a lot of low numbers in the delivery part. of housing at the moment, and it'll take more than 1/12 of the to make it anything significant.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if anyone's got any word about what the government may do for this year. It's certainly not something I've heard about, but I'm sure we would all hope that they will look on them much more favourably next year as well. Yeah.
I must admit, I did lobby my local MP the last week on this subject because I am very concerned about it, because I think if all of us could finish up at 75%, and that would be very disastrous.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm hoping that they would allow a much lower figure, but they did sort of indicate in the wording that for this year that they felt there was mitigation in place. So it's very difficult to know at this point in time, but housing delivery across the whole country has been impacted, so hopefully they will take that into account.
Yeah, the last survey I saw, sort of across the whole country, said like it was a 50% drop in delivery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anybody got any questions to Trevor on this subject? No, I'm looking. I can't see any. Right. So we're now really down to any other business. Date of next meeting.
Yeah, so I'm in the process of arranging that. It's looking very likely to be 22nd of April. I will be sending a confirmation invitation email around.
Okay. Right. Is that an old hand up by Nick? Yes. No. Yes. Yes. Right. Okay. All right. Well, if nobody's got any questions or anything, we may as well we'll close the meeting. Right. Well, thank you all for attending, and have a good rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye
Richard.
now.
Thank you. Goodbye.